turmoil in Douglas County.
I'm actually a little scared, to be honest.
With the community more divided than ever, a longtime teacher says for the first time she's considering leaving.
It's not supposed to be political. It's supposed to be about the kids.
Lessons from the 2012 Waldo Canyon fire.
We knew and understood the importance of getting things moving quickly.
7 weeks after the Marshall fire, we're going 360 on where a path to recovery has already been mapped out.
If you don't get going right away, people get discouraged and they don't come back.
And we start tonight in Douglas County, where teachers say they don't feel safe after the district nearly released the names of those who called out or took off work February 3rd.
Now that is the day the district called off classes, and a rally was held in support of now former Superintendent Corey Wise. And the names of those teachers were going to be released last night, but then that open records request was withdrawn.
As Denver 7's Jacqueline Allen is learning, the district's decision might have been related to a legal threat, and teachers who say this was the last straw.
This book is called Yummy Yucky.
To say Lois Everett loves her job is an understatement.
I have the best job on the face of the planet.
A special needs educational assistant at Pioneer Elementary, she's worked for Dougco Schools for almost 20 years. That's about to change.
I don't know if I can do it next year. I don't know how much more I can take.
If you haven't been following the Dougco drama, the new school board recently fired the superintendent. Hundreds of teachers took off work to protest and faced strong backlash, including flyers on their cars telling them to get out. On top of that, this week the district agreed to release those teachers' names in response to a Colorado Open Records request.
I'm an elementary school teacher and I wanted to curse.
The motivation is clear. It's just to harass and intimidate teachers. That's it.
Igor Rakin is an educational and civil rights attorney who wrote a warning letter to the district. If you release those records and a single educator is hurt, I will drag DCSD and all of its toxic board members into court and force them to answer for their conduct. Shortly after, the request for the teachers' names was withdrawn.
I'm not a miracle worker. I think it was the teachers who really were up in arms, who were a lot more effective in getting this Cora request removed than anything that I did.
I felt scared. I felt threatened. I felt betrayed.
Lois says the district is doing damage control now, in an email today stating Dougco will not tolerate behavior that threatens, intimidates, or harasses staff. For her, it's too little too late for what might be her last year in Dougco schools.
I tried really hard to stay in my bubble and just worry about the kids. And now they're threatening me.
A spokesperson for the school district did not comment about Rakin's letter threatening legal action or the teachers who feel targeted, simply stating the request for the teachers' names was withdrawn by the person who filed it. Reporting for Contact Denver 7, I'm Jacqueline Allen.
Well, Douglas County School Board is now taking applications for school superintendent. A proposed timeline for hiring a replacement for Corey Wise was the focus of a 7-hour-long school board meeting last night. The board's conservative majority wanted to vote on a finalist next Thursday, but have agreed to discuss a new timeline at their meeting on Tuesday. That new timeline includes a vote on a finalist March 3rd.
And while the superintendent job was posted just today, it appears the newly elected board of directors already has a candidate in mind. During last night's meeting, board president Mike Peterson said he reached out to former interim superintendent Aaron Kane a few weeks ago. Kane is currently the executive director of schools for American Academy. In a letter to American Academy families, Kane confirmed Peterson asked her to apply while acknowledging an entire process has to take place. Tonight marks 7 weeks since the Marshall Fire raced across Boulder County, destroying more than 1,000 homes in just a matter of hours. And not only is the Marshall Fire the most destructive fire ever in Colorado,
it's also just one of two Colorado wildfires to break out in what's considered an urban area. Now, the first, the Waldo Canyon fire, which destroyed nearly 350 buildings near Colorado Springs. That was the summer of 2012.
Tonight, Denver 7's Russell Haythorne gives us a 360 look at the recovery from that fire and what could come for rebuilding efforts in Boulder County.
So one of the things is we had to have a music room.
Carla Alber's home is quiet and peaceful now. Much different than the war zone her neighborhood resembled 10 years ago this coming June.
Some people say, well, why would you want something about the fire on your wall? Doesn't that bring back bad memories? You survive something and something beautiful can come out of it.
But still nobody thought a fire would come into the city. So this is Majestic Drive in Parkside. I believe 160 out of about 190 homes burned in this neighborhood.
The Mountain Shadows neighborhood was hit hardest.
Gives me goosebumps. It's all I can do not to tear up.
Eddie Hurt was Community Association president at the time.
90% of the homes in here burnt to the ground on June 26.
Colorado Springs is considered a model of success for how quickly it rebuilt after the devastating Waldo Canyon fire.
Yeah, so unbelievable restoration and rebirth.
And they want Marshall Fire victims to know there's hope. The Marshall Fire and Waldo Canyon Fire share many similarities. Both were urban interface fires. The Marshall Fire, a grassland urban interface fire in suburban Denver. Waldo, a wildland urban interface fire in suburban Colorado Springs. More than 1,000 homes were lost in the Marshall Fire, 347 in Waldo Canyon. 2 people were killed in both fires, but perhaps the biggest difference was recovery. In Waldo Canyon, debris removal started just 2 weeks after the fire. Marshall Fire victims are 7 weeks out and still waiting. In Waldo, new homes were rebuilt after 11 months. It seems unlikely the same will happen in the Marshall Fire burn zone. And that's where we begin this 360 look at lessons learned from Waldo Canyon.
The visuals of the Marshall Fire are very similar to the visuals that we saw of Waldo Canyon.
I made decisions.
It started with a no-nonsense, business-minded mayor contacting a good friend, Bob Cutter.
Probably can't say no.
The night of the fire.
And I said, okay, look, you need to head this up. We're going to get out of your way.
The very next day.
Who does that in the middle of a fire?
A recovery plan was already in motion.
That's so forward thinking.
Shortly after that, Colorado Springs Together was created.
If you don't get going right away, people get discouraged and they don't come back. And so you lose your sense of neighborhood.
Colorado Springs Together was a central database and physical building, a hub where fire victims could gather, get information, and get help with building permits, fire mitigation strategies, and the list goes on.
You offer hope through speed.
Cutter was founder and president of Colorado Springs Together.
We leased space for a year that used to be an old Blockbuster, and we turned it into a community center. They could come there, meet with their builder, they could meet with insurance people, they could meet with mental health counselors.
Holding a community together after catastrophe.
It was like a wall of fire.
Building permit experts like Roger Lavelle slashed red tape.
Really get out of the way as a government and make the process as simple as easy as possible. Within 14 days of the fire being fully contained, we'd issued our first building permit for a new home.
Within 1 year after the fire, an astounding 202 permits were issued for the 347 homes lost.
We knew and understood the importance of getting things moving quickly.
On the insurance side, navigating the claims process was critical early on too. John Putnam took the reins there.
We were underinsured here in Waldo Canyon, but we overcame.
Overcame by finding pots of money elsewhere in homeowners' insurance policies.
Buried in the policy, there's 5% debris removal. There's 10% law and ordinance, which are basically the building codes. There's another 25%, but we call it extended replacement cost.
It's estimated Putnam and his team saved homeowners millions by finding pockets of money within their policies.
I help them find it. That's been my role for this whole process.
Another perspective was fire mitigation, which was crucial but not cumbersome.
All of the blue dots are homes that were destroyed by fire. This became basically a conflagration.
Fire Marshal Brett Lacey says rebuilding meant hardening structures through reasonable, inexpensive materials and codes.
We engage neighbors, housing and building association, contractors. It's not good to have things that are too restrictive. But what we were after was just changing the materials of the homes, changing the materials of the decks so that they resist that initial ignition point by having either stucco or brick or cementitious siding.
Money Magazine featured Colorado Springs Together as runner-up for Best Nonprofit Money Heroes in America, second only to the Hurricane Sandy recovery nonprofit.
It was amazing.
Superior Rising has now met with the former mayor, Bob, and Carla, and is forming a group very similar because of how well Colorado Springs Together performed.
Certainly Superior is doing it. I think it did work here. Please copy shamelessly.
In Louisville, there's fear among many fire victims the green environmental codes for rebuilding will push people to the brink and eventually force them out.
A code like this was intended for the 5 or 6 homes that are being constructed in a year's time, not 600 people that are homeless.
If I could send a message to the people up there, it's please don't do that.
Carla worries for those victims.
You're not going to get that community rebuilt if you're going to just insist on these things that are a lot different than what they lost.
You can't expect government to get it done, at least not expeditiously. Government's not organized that way.
What Colorado Springs can provide is hope that rebuilding can happen and quickly with the right organizational efforts like Colorado Springs Together.
You have to be in it for the long haul.
It's not going to be fun, but we can make it a little easier.
In Colorado Springs,
I'm very proud of the progress the city of Colorado Springs has made.
Russell Haythorne, Denver 7.
Fascinating. And a new poll shows most Coloradans are growing increasingly concerned about the threat posed by wildfires. Going in depth now, 430 Colorado voters were interviewed for the poll conducted by Colorado College in the days and weeks following the Marshall Fire. 88% said they are concerned about more frequent and severe wildfires, with officials now characterizing fire season as year-round. 77% of Coloradans polled said they believe wildfires in the West are a bigger problem than they were 10 years ago. You can find the complete poll results right now on thedenverchannel.com.
And even before the Marshall Fire, wildfire mitigation was already going to be a focus during this legislative session. And today the state Senate approved a bill to use $5 million from the general fund to pay for equipment and training for Colorado firefighters. This bill already passed out of the House, now it just goes on to the governor. Meanwhile, 3 more bills addressing wildfires were heard in committee today. One would offer grants to landowners to help with fire mitigation on their property.
To give them an incentive and some motivation to create a safe space around their property, because they're not going to necessarily be there to defend it. We saw the effects of what happens when those fires are running rampant in those more rural areas.
A second bill would create a grant program to help counties prevent and recover from fires. And then a third would offer incentives for local governments to work on forest management and wildfire mitigation.
Enjoy a milder weekend because next week a major winter storm moving our way.
COVID-19 cases in Colorado continue to fall, but we're not out of the woods yet. What state health experts are warning could cause a new surge in cases.
Plus, why the possibility of Aaron Rodgers to Denver may have just taken another hit.